What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Cervantes podcast. Joining me today for the second and final part of this Latinidad conversation is Cornell University student and CEO and founder of SmartStacks, a personalized business automation service, Angelo Del Toro. Angelo, how are you, bro? What's good?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good.
Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. So, would you refer to yourself as Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx?
I refer to myself as Latino and Latinx the most.
Latino and Latinx, yeah. And for those who don't know, I don't think I said it in the first part of the this conversation, but Latinx is a gender neutral term, sometimes used to refer to people of Latin American cultural or ethnic identity in the United States. You know, to be more gender inclusive and of other people who are, non-binary and don't use the male female terms to describe themselves. I would describe myself as, Black, Latino, Afro Latino, Afro Caribbean, all that stuff, because I just feel like my identity encompasses all of that. So the media and the world has its twisted perception on how Latinos should look, act, and speak. And if you don't fit that box or narrative, people are often confused. I wanted to ask you, did you ever feel like you weren't Latino enough?
Yeah, like a bunch of times growing up. Like for me, my Latinidad has been like something that I've I've experienced and then rediscovered and claimed like later, like recently.
Okay.
Um, I guess I really didn't feel Latino when I was little, just because of how I grew up. I grew up speaking Spanish, like first language. Then I
Okay.
forgot it, and then
Oh,
yeah,
because you went to school and like you were learning English.
yeah, like I needed a translator and everything, and then
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
mhm, but I forgot it, and then like just growing up not speaking Spanish, it's like you're or growing up for me not speaking Spanish, it was like my Latin identity was denied. So it wasn't until I picked it up that like that part felt complete.
Yeah, I could relate to that because I think I was never the only time I really like learned and studied Spanish was at school or if I
Mhm.
was like with a bunch of family members, but if it was just like at home, we didn't really speak Spanish that much for me to like become fluent. And that was kind of like hard for me because it's like a lot of people think that like there's this joke amongst us, like in our community, the Latino community, that Puerto Ricans don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then also I think for the world and when I meet certain people, it's like, oh, like you don't speak Spanish, so how could you be Latino? And I feel like for
Yeah.
me being black, it's like I would have to be fluent in Spanish, and then people would like, oh, okay, like he is actually Hispanic, he is Latino. But me just saying it, I feel like doesn't. It's hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could relate to that.
It
And
feels like
also, yeah, what are you gonna say?
what happened? Oh, I was gonna say like it feels like better now. Like people are more cognizant of like, oh, someone's claiming this identity and that's fine because they can claim it, they own it, like it's theirs.
Right.
But I was gonna ask you like how you grew up. Like did you grow up like in a black majority environment or like majority white environment?
I'd say like the town that I grew, like I was in New Rochelle for the majority of my life, and New
Mhm.
Rochelle's pretty diverse, but it is more on like more white people than anything else. And then like growing up, I went to an elementary school that was private from like kindergarten to fourth grade, and it was like super white. And there weren't a lot of Latinos. It was just like a bunch of white kids, and then like a group of black kids, and then I think like maybe two or three Latinos.
Yeah.
And then I have like a really strong like my mom's side of the family were very close, and they're super Puerto Rican, and I feel like I definitely have the culture from my mom's side and being Puerto Rican. I just never felt Puerto Rican because a lot of my family members are on the lighter side, kind of like you, or just like really light. And I a lot of times they would like joke and like, oh, like you're Jamaican, you're not Puerto Rican, or like, oh, you're black. And it like a joke is a joke, but it's also like, there's some truth to that if you're saying that. Like when you say jokes and stuff, like when you make fun
Yeah,
of stuff. So it kind of like stuck with me, like, oh, like I'm related to you guys, but sometimes I don't feel like I'm Puerto Rican. Like I don't feel like I belong. And until like I started watching like documentaries and like meeting other Afro Latinos, and like I feel like that was a big buzzword in like
yeah,
recent years. And just hearing people's stories on YouTube about like, like the struggles of being Afro Latino, whether it's like the entertainment industry or just in everyday life, and representation. Because I think a lot of times if you don't see yourself being represented, or others don't see you being represented, it's like, oh, they can't, if they don't see it, they can't believe it, kind of sometimes.
yeah.
So yeah.
I was, I'm thinking that too, like or along the lines of what you said, that like one, representation is really important, and then two, like being black until recently has felt in like the Latino community it feels like something that's like taboo almost, like to claim your
Yeah,
blackness.
like there's a lot of anti-blackness in our
Like
community. And I think
Dominicans.
that yeah, I spoke about it in the first part, like of the first part of the episode. I think a lot of people are not proud of their African roots because they associate black with being like criminal or like uneducated or like bad. And I think that's the reason why, like, I was reading an article about like how a lot of Latinos identify as white, like
Yeah,
wrongly identify as white, and that's
I know
not
black. I know black.
right. Or they say I know black,
Hmm.
and that's harmful for many reasons, because if a bunch of Latinos are identifying as white, then we're going to be misrepresented when the U.S. Census Bureau looks at the demographics, and they see like, oh, like there's a lot of white people, when in actuality that the number of actual white people could actually be less. um and that, yeah, that's a problem, like economically, because then it's like, if we're miscounted, that's gonna cost for when the government decides to give a certain amount of money to certain black and brown neighborhoods. They're gonna give money to the white neighborhoods because people are filling out the census and they're doing certain stuff. So I think it has detrimental effects in the long run. But on like a basic level, like it's just very strange to me to be Latino and to only be proud of your European roots, when in actuality
Yeah,
those people like conquered and colonized and pillaged and
right.
raped
Yeah,
like indigenous and African people. So it's very messed up to me. And if
yeah,
you're a white Latino, like you're an actual white Latino, and you're proud of your European roots, then I guess it's a little bit different. But then it's like, what exactly are you proud of? you know
yeah. No, fully.
I think it's
Uh,
like, are you proud of, painters and arts and the Renaissance? Or are you proud of, yeah, my ancestors were colonizers. That's dope. Like, I think you have to think about that.
yeah, like I'm proud that my family was a part of the history of conquest, and I'm up here right
Like,
now.
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I always think of
Um,
like,
no, yeah,
I
we're
always
gonna say.
think of like whenever like the question of like blackness and uh being Latino, I always think of like like wearing natural hair as opposed to like straightening it and like damaging your hair and like trying to
Oh,
look lighter. That's like what I always think of.
yes. Yeah, and like a lot of like women, I'm pretty sure feel like they have to look a certain way in the workplace, or
Hmm.
like look a certain way to attract a significant other.
Yeah,
Because I think a lot of men, if we want to be honest, are interested in women who have Eurocentric
like features, right?
beauty features, physical
Yeah.
features. And I think women, they see that and they take that in. Like magazines, it's always like in American media, we always see like white women or women close to that in magazines and movies, TV shows, advertisement, and then definitely in the Latino market, you see white Latinos or maybe like mestizo or like lighter skin, kind of like yourself, Latinos portrayed in the media more. So then all the black girls, whether it's America or in Latin America, it's like, damn, like, so I'm not beautiful, like i'm
Yeah,
not
no, fully.
i'm not okay the way I am. True. The late and beloved Mexican American singer Selena Quintanilla had many hit songs that were in Spanish. However, she was not a fluent Spanish speaker. According to a 2020 Pop Sugar article by Camila Barbeto titled "Many of Selena's hits are in Spanish, but she wasn't always fluent, and that's okay." Barbeto explained that as Selena rose to fame in Mexico and Latin America, the Tejano icon had to learn how to speak Spanish more fluently in order to connect with her fan base. In Selena the series, we see how Selena had to evolve from her English speaking roots to learning Spanish phonetically with her father through music. We even see TV host Johnny Canales joke about how she didn't know Spanish when she first got on the show, with the wincing Selena laughing at the memory. Are you fluent in Spanish? And if not, did anyone make fun of you for that, like they did to Selena?
So I am fluent in Spanish now, and
Okay.
I like speak it at home with my grandmother, my mother, my uncle
Okay.
sometimes.
Nice, nice. That's important because I feel
Yeah,
like I want to be able to communicate with my family members who don't speak English that well or don't speak English at all. And it sucks that I
yeah.
have to like whip out
Translate.
Google Translate and like, ask my mom, what did she say? What
Yeah,
did TT say?
no, that's like
So,
the worst.
right, right. You get embarrassed, but
Mhm.
I um I think it's important not to blame the person who can't speak English. Like it's not their fault. You don't know their story. And I think you should try to make the effort, especially Americans. I feel like we should try to make the effort to learn another language because in other countries, like I said before, it's your intelligence is seen as greater when you know more than one language.
Yeah,
It's like English is not the end all be all. you know
yeah, definitely.
People, they kind of like family members or just like regular people, they kind of make fun of you for not learning. And I think it shouldn't be like that. Like you should want to if your cousin or your niece or nephew or brother or whatever doesn't know Spanish, teach them. Like
Yeah,
help
yeah,
them
fully.
out. Like my I have an aunt who she learned English through watching the news and watching like American television. And she was like, you got to do the same thing. If you want to learn Spanish, maybe try watching Telemundo, Univision, different Spanish programming, and then that can help you. Or even like, I think she even said she used to read the newspaper, like the New York Times.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And I think, yeah, don't make fun of somebody. Like at least they're trying. Is your culture a big part of you, or are you and your family like, yeah, I'm Latino, but it's whatever?
So it is a big part of me and like my
Same.
like day to day. Uh, my family, the side of my family that I spend the most time with is like my mother's side, and she's Dominican.
Okay.
So that's like the side that I've been raised in.
Do you
Um,
feel more Dominican sometimes than Puerto Rican?
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Like
feel
I
I don't know
can't.
why, but I feel like that culture is a little stronger.
You
I
think
feel
so?
like there's like a distinct accent, and I feel like there's like if someone's Dominican and Puerto Rican, I feel like they lean toward the Dominican side sometimes. Um, but it
I
depends
think
on
it
like
just
how the family's
depends.
set up,
Yeah,
right? And like who mom's side, dad's side. Um, but yeah, I always find it funny when like I meet Latino people or I have cousins who are like they're not like super Boricua, like they
yeah,
don't have the flag or whatever.
yeah.
I find it funny because most, I guess it's like a stereotype kind of, Puerto
That
Ricans,
they're wearing the
like they let you
flag.
know. Yeah, like on your shirt,
That's
phone
dumb funny.
case, mask, bracelet, hat, sweater,
Yeah,
blanket. So I think the Puerto Ricans I'm mostly around are like that. And then when I meet the opposite of that, it's like, oh, like wow, okay. Like I have a cousin,
nice.
she's proud of her like her roots and her culture, but she doesn't like wear it on her sleeve. And I think that's interesting. Like there's no one way to act when you're Latino. And I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah.
You might not have a strong accent. You might not like, spicy foods. You might
Mhm.
not like I don't know, like certain things that we practice. You might not like
Yeah.
reggaeton, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just it's gonna be a little
I love that
awkward
you
when you
said
go to a
that.
certain party.
I love that you said that. Like that's like a really big like idea or like positive idea about thinking like about stereotypes
Right,
about the Latino culture.
right. We live in a very racist and xenophobic country. So I wanted to ask you, did anyone make you feel like being Latino was a bad thing?
Um, I just felt it on my own. Like it wasn't explicit on like my. It was mainly in school that I'm talking about. It wasn't explicit on my school's part.
Okay.
It was more just like everybody around me was white at that time, and I was
Same.
like all the girls like the white kids. I was like, I wish I was white.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's real. That's real because it's like if they're getting all the attention, they're people are interested in them, and they're not interested in me or someone that looks like me, then I want like naturally you're gonna want to be like that. And I think yeah, it sucks to admit, but growing up in my predominantly white elementary school, I definitely wanted to be white.
yeah,
Like I
that us.
definitely wanted to fit in and be liked and make friends because the town was white, the school was white, and yeah, growing up as children, you want to fit in, and then
Yeah,
I think it takes, it sounds corny, but like self love and like
yeah,
you know your parents instilling that like you are okay, your skin color is okay, it's beautiful, God made you like this for a reason, or if you don't believe in God, you're this way for a reason, and
yeah,
that's okay. And there's no one way to be handsome, there's no one way to be beautiful,
yeah,
and I think that's important for young black and brown kids to hear, because we don't always
hmm,
hear that. I feel like white kids are always told that you're awesome, you're intelligent,
in the media
you can
too.
be president. And they see that representation. There was 43 presidents of the United States, and we had one black guy in 2008,
Hmm.
and for a second term. There's so many white movies and television shows. So they're constantly seeing themselves, and that probably helps their self-esteem. Whereas for Black and Latino children, we don't often see ourselves. You know, yes, we have BET, and we have NAACP Image Awards, the Latin Grammys, and Spanish programming, but compared to our white counterparts, it's very small. Like our own stuff. So yeah, I think representation matters, and
Yeah,
anyone listening that is Latino, like that's not a bad thing. They want to come to our countries for vacation, they want to talk like us, and they you know I think I remember I was working at 16 Handles, and one of my coworkers was like, oh, like you're half Puerto Rican, wow, like that's so cool, like I wish I was Latina, she said.
nah.
And I just laughed at that. I found that so funny because I think a
Yeah,
lot of people on the low want to be black, and or want to
yeah.
be Latino. I think on the low or even high key, they want to
Like,
be that.
y- like just right before we hopped on this call, I was eating lunch with a few distant friends. Like, I'm not like super close with them.
Yeah, yeah,
And then they're two white. They're both white. And then one of them was like, "Yeah, um, wait till the sun starts shining a little bit more. I'll become Latino. I'll become Latino." Um,
that's so weird. Like, why would you
yeah, that
even
was a
say
weird
that?
comment. But wait, he was like, "I'll start," because like the whole time that our interaction, not in a weird way, but he was like, "Yeah, I didn't get that much sleep. That's why I'm like I can't really hold a conversation right now." And then he was like, um, "Yeah, when I'll become Latino and I'll be like more energetic, like stuff like that. It was just I thinking about it right now, that's a weird thing to say. Like
Very
with a lot of
weird.
implications.
Very weird. Because it's like not only did he not only did he like believe that, he said it out loud and to
Yeah.
you, like to your face. And that's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
people are
I
like, oh,
thought
like it's just a joke. It doesn't mean anything. But no, those jokes can turn into violent violent actions, you
mhm.
know, like when two Latino people are speaking Spanish and a white person just comes over and demands that they speak English because this is America. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's wrong, you know, and people
Ridiculous.
get into fights over that, you know. I'm not a confrontational person, but that doesn't mean my friend or the next Latino or the next person, it won't be. You know, you might
Mhm.
get punched in the face for saying something like that. And as you should, because that's not okay.
As you should.
You know, I think sir, I think people need to be checked sometimes, whether it's, you know, verbally or physically. I'm sorry. But
Yeah.
that's not okay. You know, Latinos being energetic, that stereotype, or feisty, sassy,
Yeah.
loud, ghetto, that's very harmful. And
Mhm.
it's a just a very bad way to think about a whole entire group of people. But I think that comes from, you know, television, you know, and certain Latino characters that are like that are created over and over
To
again.
perpetuate the image of the
Yeah,
yeah.
you know.
Of,
And then I think because it's like it's the same type of Latino characters over and over again, certain
mhm.
people, white people, they're gonna think that
All
everyone in our
Latinos are
community
like that.
act like that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not good. Being
Yeah.
Hispanic and or Latino is a product of colonization between three groups of people: the enslaved Africans, indigenous people, and the European colonizers. Why do you think so many Hispanic Latino people forget about their African heritage?
Um, I think that's also a product of colonization, just like the preference or like the like holding whiteness up on like a pedestal. I
Yes,
think
yeah,
like I see that fully as like colonization because when Europeans came to Africa, when they went to India, when they went to like Hispaniola, to the indigenous people there, they were like, your way of living is wrong. And most of the times they came like in ways that were like peaceful through like the church or like things like that.
right.
Um, so they just like set the framework for like being able to tell people, oh, this is right, this is wrong, this is right. And it's just, I see it as like directly a product of whiteness is right, your skin color is not right.
Yes, yeah, racism, and I think a lack of education, because I think some Latinos, they know that their cultures comes from African people and African and has African roots.
Yeah,
They know, but then they don't care.
deny it. Yeah,
You
they
know,
deny it even.
racism and and they deny it. They don't want to believe that, wow, black people created all of this. You
Hmm.
know. And then I think also on the flip side, I think a lot of Latino people think they're not educated on their history and colonization and the transatlantic slave trade. Um, and they think that they come from their history, their DNA is made up of Europeans and indigenous people, and that's it. There's
Yeah.
no third party, which is the African people. So I think it's like, you know, 50-50.
Hmm.
So we just got to educate. And I think, you know, education is key. Our school curriculum needs to go more in depth about Latin American history because
Yeah.
we spend so much time on Europe. Like there's
Yeah.
courses designated just for Europe.
I'm taking a class right now called Post Colonial Remix. It's like a freshman writing seminar.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like that idea which that we're talking about right now is like something that we talk about like almost every class.
Yeah,
But
that's
like
important. Like it's not just like it's not just like slavery and then boom, civil rights movement, and like Barack Obama. Like there's so much that happened,
Yeah.
in between, and they just don't teach us that. And I think there has to be a better way to teach students K through 12 and even in college, because that's really cool that you're learning that now. There has to be a
Yeah.
better way to teach about, Black history and Latino history. There has to be a better way because
Like,
where people are going out in the world thinking certain things and saying certain things that are completely false. So we got
yeah.
to change that.
Like, I know we went to the same high school, me and Cervantes. And
Shout out to Iona Prep.
shout out to Iona Prep, man. But like, there was like full courses on European history, full courses on U.S. history, full courses on American history. I mean, like American government.
Right.
And there's, I would say like maybe 2 or 3, 4 units in my 4 years of high school where we focused on like the like slavery or the civil rights, and we'd spend like chapters and months on like European kings that
Right.
ultimately had like very little impact on our society today, whereas like race relations, race management, things like that, they
Right.
have like a really big impact.
And I feel like we're learning about the same old white people over and over again.
Yeah, that.
Like, we already know about Christopher Columbus and all the horrible things that he did. We already know about
Mhm.
King George and Queen Elizabeth and all that stuff and Michelangelo. Like, can we learn about some Black people? Can we learn
Yeah,
about, some Latino people in history? I think it's also important, like, who is teaching history in schools, in public schools, private schools, charter, whatever? Who is teaching it? Because I never had a teacher say that that Jesus wasn't white. Like I remember Mr.
yeah.
Mitchell was like, I
Yeah.
remember Mr. Mitchell was like, oh, like Jesus was not white. Sorry to break it to you. And I was like, wow, you're the first white teacher I've had that has said that, white person that has said that. And I was like, he really wanted to let us know because I think that's another thing that people try to perpetuate. But yeah, you have all these, teachers in schools are predominantly white women, and white
Yeah.
women look at the world through a certain lens. And I think they have a biased approach. We all have biases, but
Yeah.
when speaking about history, you need to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I
I
think a lot of white teachers and professors are not telling the truth or the full truth.
Mhm.
Like what really happened. Let's hear some accounts from some primary sources from Black people, not just the white people that were in power. So yeah, I think who's teaching this curriculum and who creates the curriculum. I know who it is, but that needs to change. So we
yeah.
need more Black professors and Latino professors and teachers.
I'm thinking that, but also like it seems like the result of a system that was meant to show off like whiteness and perpetuate white pride
Right,
because
like look at all that we did
mhm,
and accomplished and colonized.
yeah, I see
Yeah.
it as like I'm also in another class about like race management.
Oh
uh
wow, okay.
yeah,
And what are
so
you guys
it's
learning there?
basically it's like a labor history class, but
Labor history.
yeah, so like the
Okay.
history of unions, the history of basically labor in the US. And the first week, few weeks, 3 weeks, we spent a lot of time on like slavery and the management of slaves and indentured servants and uh, just labor relating to like that time period.
Okay.
And one of the biggest takeaways that I was able to like the points I was able to take away from that was that white people have had a lot of influence in creating the laws that affect us today. Like even in like the wordings and like the just the liberties that were allowed to Black people and like the history that goes into like um like Civil War type time. Like
Right.
all that history, like remnants of it are still in our society, and you could
Yes.
see
But
that.
it's taught through a white lens. And I think that when white people are creating these curriculums for students, like for kids in school, it's like they are the vocabulary that is used in the textbooks is a lot of times false. Like I saw like something on the shade room once that like I think it was a school in Texas, I believe, that in the textbook it said that the enslaved Africans were like workers, like it was just like a weird terminology.
Yeah,
And it's just
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
no, they were not workers, they were enslaved. Like those
Yeah,
people were enslaved, they were not workers. um or like maybe like pictures of like smiling black faces of like the
Mhm.
enslaved Africans, like they're smiling and they're happy to be there. Like that is that's not that's not okay. That's not okay for children to learn and to hear, because then they're gonna think that, oh, slavery wasn't that bad and
Yeah,
black people should just get over it, and that's harmful. That's a harmful way of thinking, because slavery, what, like, I was not a slave, but the stories and the things that we have learned and the movies we've watched, that was terrible, you know
yeah,
physically, mentally. And I think, the way I think the way white history is taught is not the same way black history is taught, and that needs to change. But,
yeah.
unfortunately, there are so many viral videos on social media of white people, harassing Latinos for speaking Spanish and telling them to speak English, because this is America, and if you don't like it, you can go back to your country. What do you think or say when stuff like this happens?
Um, what I think is that the person saying that is totally out of line. Like, for
Right.
mostly this country's been built on the back of people who speak different other languages than English. So
Right.
for you to say that doesn't make sense. And then usually what I say is to the person that, like, the white person said that to, is like, it's okay to speak your language. And
It's just so stupid. Like the native language of this country is not English. So to
yeah,
assume that this huge country with millions of people, that everyone needs to speak English fluently and coherently, is one of the effects of white supremacy. Like
yeah,
it's one of the like effects of white supremacy, because that you expect everyone to sound a certain way, and that's not fair, because there's immigrants that come here. There's people that they're born here, but they just want to speak the language of their culture, and that's okay. So for you to just insert yourself in someone's conversation and demand that they speak English, that's just so like that's so problematic. That's so problematic, because I think
yeah.
when two European people are speaking their language, if two Italians or two French people or two German people are
You're
speaking
like,
their
oh,
language, oh,
nice.
that's so cool. I
Mm-hmm.
want to learn that. Like, wow. Um, but when two brown people are speaking Spanish, it's like it's like a secret code language that white people have to decode and like figure out what you're saying. And
Yeah.
that's just so weird. Like, mind your business, bro. Like, it's not that deep. Mind your business.
Mm-hmm.
Leave people alone. So yeah, that's all I gotta say about that.
Yeah.
What are some misconceptions about Hispanics or Latinos that you would like to clear up?
Um, I guess like for a younger generation, just about like school and stuff like that, because um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the model minority
Yes.
idea with the
Yes.
Asian community.
Right. Right.
Like on the opposite end of the spectrum, Hispanics and Black children are like, they're seen as like, oh, they're not really going to do that well in school, and that's expected. Like that's what like the
Right.
stereotype is, and I think that's really detrimental to like the young Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latin children who feel like, oh, I don't have to do that good because it's not expected of me, or I'm not in my place if I'm doing really good in school.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of times I've seen it in like several times like in school where it's like if a student if a black or Latino student is struggling, um the teacher doesn't really the teacher doesn't really pay attention to them and doesn't really put a lot of effort. But if a white student
Mhm.
is struggling, it's like they motivate them and push them and encourage them to do well. And
Yeah,
I think that's very problematic. Like, why don't you? So because that kid is wearing a do rag, or that kid has cornrows, or that kid is dark skinned, or that kid has an accent, or that kid is wearing a hoodie and some Jordans, that means that
he
he's
doesn't need the
not as
motivation.
he's not engaged, he's not as
Hmm.
engaged, or she's not as intelligent or prepared or worthy of your guidance as a teacher, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's very problematic. That's
Hmm.
very, yeah. Like they deserve, because then that's gonna turn into like, oh well, nobody cares about me, so I'm just gonna do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks I'm gonna fail, so I should fail.
Yeah.
And I've and I've heard that, I've seen that. It's like, like I don't care, or like
Like
I'm
they
not
don't
I'm
care.
not gonna go to college because college is not, it's not for me, it's for white kids. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, that's not true. Like you have every right. You are no different. Um, you going to public school, you're no different than a private school kid. It's low key the same education. It's not that much better. Speaking as someone who, went to New Rochelle High School and went to public schools, and then I went to private schools and I went to Iona Prep. It's the same education. I just now I don't have to take a Regents and I'm paying a lot of money in tuition. That's really it. And I go to a all boys Catholic school, so that's a whole different thing. But it's the same
Uh,
education.
I think there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot that goes into like public versus private schools, like where there's also like privilege that's involved, and that I feel like the education is a tiny bit better, like in terms of preparing you for like one college curriculum and then like life in college and after college.
That's true. That's
Hmm.
true. I think maybe what I'm trying to say is like the perception. I think people automatically assume that, oh, because you're in private school,
Hmm.
you are better than me or you're smarter than me. And I
Yeah.
think I think private schools, they get more funding, of course, and it's less students in the class, so there's more attention put on students, and it's more, the environment is different. But I think that I don't want kids growing up that go to public school to think that
So
they're
yeah.
not good enough,
Okay.
especially
Yeah.
Black and Latino kids who are going to public schools where the schools aren't getting the great amount of funding. I don't want them to think that they're dumb or that they have to go to
Hmm.
private school in order to succeed. No, the majority of this country goes to public school. That means the majority of people are running stuff, businesses and government and all that stuff. That means they went to public school too. So it's okay. At the end of the day, I think, just believe in yourself. And if you
Hmm.
want to go to that school or you want to get that job, you're just as good as me or Angelo. Even like with colleges, yes, Ivy Leagues are awesome, but don't think that just because you don't go to Ivy League means that you're less than. Like,
Yeah.
no. Everyone has different paths. I know that there's some kids who could have gone to Ivy League, but they chose to go to a different school for financial reasons. They couldn't afford to go to Harvard. They couldn't afford to go to UPenn. So they chose, a city school or a state school, you know. But yeah, that's
Hmm.
that's a whole conversation about like standardized testing and SAT
Yeah.
and
Privilege.
colleges. So yeah. At a party, which Latino artists do you have on your playlist? Who are you playing?
I could check my Apple Music right now. I listen to a lot of different artists, mostly like reggaeton. So number one, Bad Bunny. But after
Yes.
that, like Raul Alejandro, Eladio, um, J Balvin, Mike Towers,
Alvin, nice.
Arcangel, Sedge,
Yes. Ozuna, Anuel, Daddy Yankee, Mark
Jay
Anthony.
Cortez. Yeah,
Yes, Jay Cortez.
they go so hard.
Right. Lunai. He's like a
Hmm.
newer artist. Um, yeah, there's so many, and I think it's funny how like in the American like mainstream market, like Spanish music and salsa and bachata and reggaeton, it's becoming more mainstream, and like white people are
Yeah.
going crazy over it.
They'll
But
be like, I love this song. I don't know what you're saying though.
right, or like the way they went crazy for Despacito. It's just so funny because
That
growing
kills
up,
me.
Spanish music, reggaeton and reggae, it was always big in my family and amongst my
Yeah.
friends and my community. Like that was primarily what we listened to besides rap. Um, so it's just like it's funny, like, oh, like now you guys are getting hip to it, but we've been bumping this for years, like decades. So it's just very interesting. What is your advice for young Hispanic or Latino children who are growing up in predominantly white spaces and they feel insecure about their name, culture, or skin color?
Um, for those young Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx children, Latin children, um, I'd say just to claim your identity foremostly. Like maybe it's not so much Hispanic. Just try to figure out who you are, and then if being Hispanic and Latino is a part of that, then that's amazing. Because for me, it was like I'm not sure if you left the school before this happened, like graduated. I mean,
Okay.
I started like a Latinx service club, and like that was me claiming my identity as
Yes.
Latino.
Yes. I remember that.
So yeah, that helped me become like the person who I am, the person I am right now. And, like just it gave me a confidence that if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had.
I think that's really dope because like the high school we went to, it was predominantly white. Um, and there were not a lot of black kids. And then there were even less Latino kids.
Yeah,
So it's like, joining the African American society, that was
that's
really
big.
dope for me because that made me like, oh, like I have a sense of community here. So I can't imagine how it must felt for you. I wish I was there for when you like created that club, but I can't imagine how it felt for you to, create your own sense of community amongst the
Mhm.
Latinos in Iona Prep. I think that's really dope because it's important. I think some people think that like, oh, like that's life, whatever. People are racist. I don't care. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you can't you can't just brush your shoulders off with everything, you know? And it's gonna come a point where you might not care about racism, but it's gonna care about you. Like it's gonna affect you. Whether it's you being pulled over, whether it's you being spit on, harassed, um, you not getting a certain job, the job that you prayed for and worked hard to, get, whether it's, somebody not wanting to date you on a dating app or in real life because you're dark or because of your culture, whether it's, it can happen in so many different ways, systemically, socially, somebody being thrown in jail, the exonerated five, those kids were
Mhm.
just chilling, and they were accused of raping a white woman.
Yeah.
And that same woman years later um was like, those kids didn't do it, it was this person, and the criminal justice system still did not care. So I just think
Yeah.
people that brush it off and like, oh, it's whatever, like, no, it will affect you, you know
So for young for young children that are like growing up where they don't feel secure about like their identity, like speaking on what you just said, I'd say it's important also to develop a voice against racism and prejudice, like the ones that you're experiencing that you perceive. Like what you perceive is valid. You don't have to
Yes.
feel invalidated because you're not in a predominantly Latino community where the main opinion would be in your support. Like being in a white community, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, like if I speak out, there's gonna be social repercussions, or there's gonna be like this, like I'm getting in trouble, whatever. But I think the the impact of developing your voice against those uh, like prejudices and discrimination is way greater than the impact of like the small minor social repercussions you might face, where
Right.
afterwards you're gonna be like, damn, they I could have spoken out against that and I didn't, and I
Right.
don't know how
Like
to
seeing
feel.
something, seeing like an injustice take place, or seeing someone being harassed, and like you not stepping up, you not speaking up.
Mhm.
That bystander, like that could end up
That
really
affects
bad
you.
for that person, for the victim.
Oh yeah, for the victim and you too.
Right. Because you could later end up in that same predicament. And if no one stands up for you, how are you gonna feel? So I think it's important. Yeah, you definitely, I agree. Use your voice. Never be afraid to call people out. Call your friends out. Um, and it's tough having those uncomfortable conversations. It's really tough. Whether it's about racism, colorism, toxic
Yeah.
masculinity. Um, yeah, it's tough, but I think if we never have those conversations and we never really think about this and change the way we act, because just because it was okay 10 years ago or 20 years ago doesn't mean that it wasn't wrong. Like just
Yeah.
because nobody was calling people out back then doesn't mean that it wasn't wrong. So
Mhm.
you have to set boundaries for people. So yeah, be proud of your culture. We have a rich, diverse culture and history. I love being Latino. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I'm really proud. I'm really proud of being Black. I'm really proud of being Latino. And it wasn't easy. I didn't always think like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I just think, having a strong sense of family and friends and educating myself really helped me have that self love within my culture and identity and
Yeah.
mi
That's
gente.
awesome. Mhm.
So I love it. I love it. Finally, my last question for you: what does being Latino mean to you?
Uh, for me, I I would describe it in two ways. One is just like as an aspect of my identity, where I feel like being Latino is um like a second name, and then
Mm,
after that, a source of pride because I'm like really proud to be Dominican. I'm really proud to be Puerto Rican, and that's how I identify. So that's what it is for me.
yeah, I think it's just so cool. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
just so cool, and we've contributed so much to this country and this world.
Mm-hmm.
Like shout out to you know reggaeton artists. Shout out to AOC. Shout out to Sonia Sotomayor. Shout out to Cesar Chavez and just all the great Latino people and Afro
Mm-hmm.
Latino people. I can't forget about Celia Cruz and Roberto Clemente. People who have paved the way for people to come after them. And I just think
Yeah.
people need to put respect on our name and really appreciate that. Yeah, Latino people have done a lot, and I think sometimes they don't always get the credit that they deserve, especially Afro Latinos and Black people in the community. Thank you, Angelo, for joining me on this conversation. I really appreciate it. That concludes this, segment of Latinidad. Thank you guys for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And tune in next week for a whole new episode. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks.